She Slayers, and welcome to another episode of She Slays Today podcast. I am your host, Dr. Lauren Brunswick. Okay, well, for those who have been following me on social, you know that last weekend I ran a half marathon. And it was so fun. Oh my gosh. But there was a lot of not fun parts, like the training, obviously. So that's not my first one that I've done, but I haven't run since 2019. And so I really didn't know what to expect. And back in 2019, like I was really getting into like PRs and stuff like that. And this time I wasn't doing that. I was like, I am just going to like go for a casual 13.1 mile run. Um, but then the training process just sucks, and what it does to my body sucks. I easily gain 10 pounds pretty much every time that I run a half. And that is not, and for those that are like, oh, it's all muscle. Nope. No, it's not. It is definitely not muscle. Uh, yes, it is belly fat. It is belly stuff. And like, I'm sure there's lots of different reasons. Cortisol, right? My body's holding on to every single calorie I give it. And then speaking of every calorie I give it, like I'm usually a very keto type eater. Not when I'm running. My runs do terrible if I'm not eating carbs, like bread, pasta, pizza, give it. I was like, all right, in order for my runs to do well, I'm just gonna eat all the spaghetti and do all the stuff. Yeah, so I'm like, this is my last one. This is stupid. And then like 4 a.m., I'm getting on a bus and getting dropped off at a starting line. And I could just tell him, like, this is totally not going to be my last one. I am going to do this again, but we'll see. So now I'm going into like full on trying to recover my cortisol. So I like immediately switched to carnivore, which is so crazy. The sugar cravings, when you realize like, wow, sugar is I have an addiction. It's a thing. Like at like 6 p.m., 7 p.m. when I'm done with dinner, I would be like an angry grizzly bear going through a uh gross garbage can in a back alley, looking for a half empty chocolate bar. But I'm not. I'm doing great. So anyways, so there's that. Also along the lines of like running the half. So you guys know, because I a couple episodes ago I talked about Tokyo, and then if you've been watching social media, you also know that there is an event coming up in October with Elise Rigney and Steph Wigner. I don't know if you know where it is yet. I mean, it's kind of out there. It's in Florida. Okay. Not Destin though, just in case you were like trying to piece the puzzle pieces together and you're like, oh, she used Taylor Swift's Destin, Florida. No, it's not in Destin. It's in a way cooler city than that. But yeah. So I had someone reach out who I haven't talked to in like 9 months. And I just got the text of like, hey, how are you? And like, what's new? And I'm just not somebody who's I'm just vulnerable. I'm transparent. And I'm like, things are actually really great. I mean, I'm not an eternal optimist. I would just as equally be like, things are a goddamn garbage fire over here. Like, this is happening, da 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 da. But this person hit me on a day where, like, I was like, hey, I ran a half marathon. We're planning a family trip to Tokyo. I just onboarded a brand new clinic director of ops that I am so excited is going to help get our clinic to like that next level. And I'm planning a conference for 400 Kairos in Florida in October. What's new with you? And then the person was like, not much. And I was just like, and then I felt like a jackass because it was like, well, I wasn't coming across braggy. I wasn't trying. Like, those are the things that are happening in my life right now. And I think that sometimes, and like, I don't know how many of you can relate to this. Sometimes I feel like interacting with, like, I just don't fit with everyone. And I think that's okay because, like, I think that nobody fits with well, there are some people. There are some people who really do. They seem to just like chameleon the shit out of their way through life. But like sometimes I just feel a little intense, a little big emotionally. Sometimes I also physically feel big. I'm a tall person. But And so it was just that reminder because I felt bad about myself of like, I shouldn't have responded so boldly and optimistically. I should have been like, not much. What's new with you? But then I realized like, I'm not interested in being friends on that level with, like, I'm not interested in those relationships. Not saying that I'm not going to be friends with somebody who that's the extent of their life. I mean, because I guarantee you, I could look at like, there's something going on in your life like you learned how to rewire a circuit or like I don't know, like you decided to start growing pot in your backyard. I don't know, but like give me something interesting. And I just don't want to put effort into relationships that are going to stay really that like surface level. Like if this is a conversation that you would basically have with the person waxing your eyebrows, eh, like I that's not a relationship. But on the other hand, my intensity towards friendships and relationships has definitely burned out quite a few people over my history. So this is where we go. Not for everyone, but that's okay. That's all right. Okay, so let's talk about who we have today. So I'm trying to remember because this interview was recorded a couple months ago, and I'm pretty sure the end of this episode got a little X-rated. I think we talked about some sexual stuff. And I remember as I was asking the question, because you know me, a lot of times I'm like playing devil's advocate, asking questions that are really not for other people, but they're for me. But if this is the episode, I'm pretty sure I like made an analogy to like somebody who wants to have sex every day and then the other person only wants it once a week. I just want to be clear that that's not me or Kirby. Like this was truly a like, what if you have extremes here type of thing. So I know I share a lot and I don't talk about my sex life, but that's not me and that's not Kirby. So there we are. You know I read too many romance novels for that shit. Okay, so Naketa Ren Thigpen is on a mission to build stronger families that L.E.A.V.E, new multi-generational imprints. What? That leave, but it's like all capitalized. I'm pretty sure that. Oh, we talk about it. Yeah, we talk about it. So don't worry, she'll talk about it. But multi generational imprints from their self actualized wholeness at the intersection of work life balance, sustainable business, mental health, and fulfilling intimate relationships. Holy cow. That is a dense, that is a very dense bio. Okay, okay. Nikita is on a mission to build stronger families that leave new multi generational imprints from their self actualized wholeness at the intersection of work life balance, sustainable business, mental health, and fulfilling intimate relationships. Yeah, that's that's a mouthful. It's good though. It's a good conversation. You are going to like it. We talk about all sorts of things in there, and it's a good one. So this is a great one if you are running, driving. Like sometimes I'm like, oh, get your pen and pencil. Like there's, yeah, you'll get it in the show notes and stuff. But like this is just a great one for you to listen to while you're multitasking, because some of these I go, "Hey, people, listen up. This is gonna, like, change your practice, and you're gonna wanna take, like, 6 pages of notes." This one, just consume. Just, like, be. Just be, and be lighthearted for this one. They can't all be incredibly serious, although I do think we get kinda serious, but you know me. Let's take a breath, connect with yourself. Dear God, thank you so much for the crazy, just different variety of conversations that we get to have with people. Um Thank you for giving me a space that my intensity and vulnerability can show up and it's not weird. Um, I know that each one of us has just such a unique place and it can feel so self judgy when you bump up against like the barrier where you're like, oh, that place isn't for me. And it can really make you feel more sad about yourself that like you should fit in everywhere, and I just don't think that that's how you created us. I think that sometimes you really just protect us from certain people and certain situations that would just dull our light. And so God, I ask for everyone listening, if they've experienced rejection in some form or shame, about themselves in some form recently for you to just fill them with that confidence that you were protecting them in that moment from those people because they were just going to take them off path or dull their light. In your name we pray. Amen. Okay, here is my conversation with Naketa Thigpen. Enjoy. So you are the host of 2 different podcasts.
Yep.
So the first one, Balance Boldly Podcast, I already forgot the entire name. Okay, so
Because
what's
we
the
because we were dancing when we said
Yeah,
it.
I was
So
distracted.
so our signature podcast that we've had running since 2016 is Balance Boldly for Ambitious Women in Business and a Few Brave Men. For
Such a
anyone who could
good
see
name.
us, you got to shimmy
Yeah, you
when you
gotta
say it.
So what did it always start out with the few brave men, or did you add that on later?
No, it was always a few brave men. Actually, Apple doesn't allow all the characters, so we have to
Mhm.
put it in the description because it
'Kay.
it cuts you off for
Yep.
super long verbose names that only Nikita would create. But it really is about a few brave men. Like I work with power couples, not just the individual. Although we also work with those potent humans who are coming to us individually, whether they're leaders, founders, entrepreneurs. Many times they are women, but not always. Sometimes the men reach out like, listen, she ain't acting right.
Mhm.
I need some support.
Yeah, I mean, our podcast started I started this as a podcast for female chiropractors.
Yeah.
And then, we only had female guests, but then
Mhm.
like a year or 2 in, I really started to feel like, I mean, men are showing up. Like
Yes,
men are
they
showing
are.
up nowadays. And
Mhm.
so I was like, shoot, this isn't a place just for women. And the
Mhm.
conversations we were having were like really just relevant to leaders in this day and age who are trying to have balance
Yeah.
between like strong leadership, but also soft leadership. And so I was like, oh, so so now I'm like, I don't know if I need to change the name. I'm the she. I'm the she. I'm still identify as she. So the name is sticking, but
You are the she. And honestly, that probably draws in some of the what I would call brave men, like brave enough to be
Mhm,
anchored in whoever that you are and not get caught in pronouns. You know what I mean? But
mhm.
if you're getting value from the show, regardless that the majority of your audience is women, then so be it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, every man here has some vagina that they came out of. So I'm just
Yes.
saying.
We're all trying to, yeah, we will. Okay, so you had a history, or you have a history of being a psychotherapist in
Mhm.
trauma. So I'm assuming that came before the podcast. So
Yeah.
what led you to kind of make that bridge from
Yeah.
working one-on-one with clients to what you do kind of now?
Yeah, so I know I look really young. I'm not. So for over 2 decades, I was a psychotherapist, trauma specialist, and relationship expert. I worked
Yeah.
in a lot of different clinical spaces, from crisis spaces when people were having actual breakdowns, all the way through sexual assault response, special delivery, NICU, like emergency room is my training. That's where I was trained
Okay.
in emergency rooms, and all the things that kind of go with that. And I was really, really good at my job. I loved my job. I wasn't in love with it anymore. So
Mhm.
in 2011, because at the time that we're recording this, we're about to turn 13 in a couple of days, for
Oh,
our
wow.
business. So we're almost 13 years old. My husband and I started it May of 2011. And the reason really to kind of leap into another phase was honestly, I felt overwhelmed both from a day-to-day 12, 16-hour shift burnout perspective, because
Mhm.
hospital systems, like all the things,
Yeah. Well,
but
and
also
you're in ER, like you're on call.
exactly, like, and the shifts, you're working midnight shifts, you're working day shifts, you're working middle shifts, like everything's changing, rotating. And real talk, I had multiple jobs. I was also in my doctorate program at the time. Like there was a lot of layers to me that were doing the things in search of where is the place where I will feel embedded in that in love space, because it's confusing when you're really, really good at many things, especially those
Mhm.
things that you're known for. Like I can handle crisis like nobody's business. Is that where I want to play every day?
Right.
No, but I can handle it. I'm really good at it. I see it as a gift. I still incorporate all those clinical tools as a balance and relationship advisor, which is the umbrella that I wear I guess, my tool belt under these days. So it's a little coaching, a little clinical strategy, consulting, metaphysics, like it's all of the happy tools that I use intuitively sync to however I can help that person ultimately self-actualize their wholeness and break some generational curses. Like that is ultimately the goal. So they're passing down a new legacy from this imprint of goodness where they're not passing down the trauma from their parents or from their coach that hurt them or that dance teacher that scarred them and told them they were too skinny or too fat and all the other things that are kind of driving our adult decisions. I really wanted to support people. And when you are licensed, as I am double board certified, you are restricted to the state from which you are licensed and
Mhm.
working with people in that way and only within the prescription of their diagnoses that the insurance companies are paying you for. So there's
Mm.
a lot of brackets, if you will, around how you can support people. And I'm a healer, Lauren, at the end of the day. Like my take all the titles, take all the degrees, all the certifications away. I am a healer. I am an activator. So telling your doctor how to do the medicine when they know that there's a better way, but we're only going to pay you if you do it this way and you give them this label was really a challenge to my inner rebellious nature. And
Mhm.
that was honest, like behind the curtain, that was a lot of like, this feels restrictive. Like, this feels tight on me. These clothes don't fit anymore. And I prayed on it. I really was like, I need to know, where am I going? What am I here for, if you will, from a bigger
Mhm.
ethereal question. And I had a download. I had a vision of this large, huge institution that I know was figurative. It wasn't like a physical brick and mortar vision. And I could see all the layers from supporting people one on one to the group massive programs to the retreat to the intensives to people laying out, stretched out, crying tears of joy. Like I could see all the layers. And the thing that stood out for me the most is building stronger families. And so that is ultimately, regardless of how we do it, it's what we're doing.
So yeah, you segued perfectly into my next question of like a lot of times this is and like so like as I read through your bio sheet and things like that,
Hmm.
there's it's interesting that you incorporate stronger families
Yeah.
because when if you were just observing a lot of the buzzwords that you said that are used on social media,
Hmm.
there can be this very like this is like inner work and it's my shadows and
Hmm.
it's like and it can be very about the self,
Yeah.
which can be very I don't want to say it is selfish, but like it's not
Which it should
about
be, right? Like in a
right
good
because but
way.
right,
Yeah.
and so, like, I
Mhm.
wanna talk about the why it's not bad if it is selfish, but, like, how did you land on the families aspect? Because I feel like a lot of traditional
Mhm.
coaches in this or, therapists in this realm, like, aren't talking about the family aspect of it.
Yeah, well, so I'm a nerd, like point blank period. Like I have a lot of math inside of me and not just in numerical math, but a lot of mnemonics come up for me. So I have formulas for everything. Ask me how to put your underwear on. I have a formula for it. Like no. Joking, not joking. And one of the formulas for joy is literally your balance, which I define as the truth of what you truly want in this world, not just what you need, over the boundaries that you're creating to achieve that truth as reality. That is your balance, work life balance, whatever you want to describe it. That is how balance is, in my opinion, my professional expertise of 20,000 plus families over the course of my time. That is how people stay anchored to the trueness of themselves. What is your truth? My truth is, I want to be a librarian. I'm really not about this software engineering life, right? Like, whatever it is. Okay. But your parents supported software engineering. That's the college that they pay for. That's the accolades that you get patted on the back, like, oh, it's so dope. You're a software engineer. Fantastic for those who want to be, but that's not your happy place. Your truth is you want to own a library and have your name on it. So let's create some boundaries around what it is you're trying to do, why you want to do it, so you can achieve that and get rid of all the other things. It's not about 50-50, 70-30 of your time and energy. So if I can help people achieve that, what I would call balance from that formula of T over B, well, now I have to add in healthy relationships because in this example of owning and working in the library, yes, that's happy for me, but at some point I leave that library
Mhm.
I wanna have some really good I happen to be female, so I wanna have some really good friendships with other women because women just it's something we do. We give to each other in a different energetic way that no matter how amazing that man is, it's just different. They
Mm.
can't give to you the way another sister, friend, lover, whatever, like, they just can't give it to you in that way. So I wanna make sure that I'm healthy enough to give and receive from my sister friend, whether it's a biological sister friend or not, but like I really want to be able to be healthy. But even she can't give me everything that I really want to kind of spark me and make me feel all good and tingly inside. For me, because not only am I a personally social creature, as most of us are, but I am a lover of love. I want love in all of its facets. And for me, because I am a sexual being, that includes sex, which for me, as a heterosexual woman who happens to be married, that includes the love of a man. I want to be healthy enough to allow in that love from that other healthy human. So, all of that is a part of the formula for joy. It is your balance plus your healthy relationships times your intimacy squared. That equals your joy. If you want to really have joy, which ultimately leans into your peace, you can't just be all about self. That self absorption is not going to work. Being
Mm.
intentionally selfish to do the work, to be healthy enough to allow in and to receive, right? Like, because it should be a reciprocal process. Many of us enter into friendships, platonic, as well as friendships that are not platonic with this, it's me, me, me. What are they giving me? Oh, they weren't good enough for me. They weren't nice to me. They didn't do for me. Okay, fair. That's fair. What did you do for them? What did you
Right.
allow them to do for you? How did you train them to appreciate you based on how you showed up versus assuming that they should just I don't know, absorb how you want to be treated. Maybe the other person love bombed you, so now you hate gifts, but they are a gift giver. They had no idea that that's something that's a trigger for you unless you train people to that. And when we are in these kind of imbalanced states of mind, we isolate ourselves and then we get really, really hard, which allows us this kind of armor that suffocates us instead of just protecting us, which can't actually bring you joy because we are here to contribute to the world one way
Mhm.
or another. You're contributing to the great work that you started with, specifically in the healthcare space, like helping chiropractors who are helping people come into their body, understand their body, heal their body to do those things. And by helping them, you ripple to the patients, to their lovers, to their friends, to all the other ways. And now over the space of your just your podcast alone, not including your other work that you do and the other ways you contribute, now you're contributing to a larger base because you have men that are like, hey, I'm really receiving from
It's the
this
same
too.
equation for them too. Yeah, it's not an equation
Exactly.
just for females.
Exactly.
So, I wanna talk about a couple different key aspects of that equation. The first one being, like, your true joy.
Hmm.
Do you feel like it is reasonable that somebody graduating high school would know themselves well enough? Like,
Hmm.
can you wave a magic wand and it be a reality that someone could figure out what that true joy is before testing it and living life and bumping up against? Because, like, it's just like you may have someone who's like, well, a librarian makes 40,000 and a software
Hmm.
engineer makes 200,000. I
Hmm.
don't want to be broke.
Right.
That's going to be my true joy. Or,
Hmm.
or reverse, but like, is that reasonable to expect someone in their early 20s or
It's
even late 20s?
That's I know,
Early
right?
30s.
Late 30s, 40s, 50s.
Yeah.
It's a layered question in that one, from a biological perspective, the brain is not fully developed until 25,
Mhm.
assuming that there's no other developmental cognitive issues that are going on in that human. It's going to be on average 25 years old. So they're literally still developing. They're still parts of their brains are still lighting up that they didn't even know existed
Right.
up until that point. And let's just sticking with your example, let's assume that they're under 25, that they're still developing it in their brain. The layering of that is part of how we get to the purpose that's already in us. Nobody Nobody on the outside of you can show you your purpose. They can help guide you to the deeper parts of you so you can uncover it. I call it breaking down so you can break open and then create those minor, like kind of mini shifts that help you break through ultimately to where you want to be. You can start having those mini shifts at 9 years old, right? Like depending on where you are, but you'll keep cycling through that as you come to different life cycles in your life. The 12-year-old version of you had a very different view of the world than the
Mhm.
16-year-old version of you. Once you got to high school and faced mean girls and maybe experienced or was the bully. Like, there's all those kind of layers that are now a whole new level to you. That 16-year-old is very different than even the 18-year-old who technically has a lot more pressure on he, she, or they because there's an expectation from their guardians of where you should be. You should have made up your mind. You should know what you want to do. You should be following the path of your family
Mhm.
to be doctors and scientists and lawyers and engineers or whatever the case is, or maybe even you're expected to fail like I was expected. My mother was 17 years old when she had me, and there was a lot of layers to that, and to this day in 2024 she is still addicted to substances. So there's a
Mm.
lot of layers for that, and I was expected to follow that trajectory. My biological father was in and out of jail since I was 15 and had started drugs about a year after my mother started when I was 9 when I discovered it. So there was, your expectations can be set up for success or set up for the success of failure. Like this is what you're expected to do. And that human that's still developing, that's still trying to figure out like where do I want to be when I grow up? Because when I was 5, I said I'd be a firefighter. When I was
Right.
12, I said I'd be a teacher because I loved, Mrs. So and so or Mr. So and so. All of those
But your
things are
world is only that big.
your world
Like,
is only that right,
yeah,
right? It's like 4 blocks, depending
yeah,
on if your parents even allowed you to go 4 blocks, right? Like,
right.
it's usually a 4 to 8 block radius, and unfortunately, for some 20 and 30-year-olds, it's still the same radius because of their community expectations of what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to vacation, that's for other people. We do this, we put our money here, we eat, we crap, we drink, we party, we go to sleep, we escape, we do it all again over and over and over again. And maybe if you're lucky, you breed, right? Like you breed a couple of things that continue to help you, cycle through the process. So to come back to your question and the layering of it, yes, there are humans that can absolutely play with passions, which I feel like is like I wish I had a visual of like a pickaxe picking through like mining for gold. If you're picturing that person with the pickaxe that's like hitting the rock. Every time you play with the passion, I want to be a firefighter. Oh, that feels fun. Oh, let me start playing with coloring. Let me see where that goes. Oh, as I grow up, let me play with selling. What was the first thing that most kids do? You sell door to door,
Lemonade.
right? The lemonade or the candy for the candy sell for
Yeah.
school. Let me just, oh, I kind of like negotiating. I like giving people things and they give me greenbacks, money for it on the other side. Oh, let me sell t-shirts. Let me design that. Oh, let me write some articles in a blog and see if I can get advertisements, right? Like you're picking your passions, let you decalcify all that chaos that has kind of accrued on top of who you really are on side to get to that. So I think picking and playing in the passions that young people are really more likely to do if they're supported to do it, because
Mhm.
we're trying to help them see you don't have to know that you want to live as a surgeon at 7. It's okay that you changed your mind 10 or 20 times. What's not okay, and what one of the things, my kids are 27 and 23. I told them very clearly growing up, a consistency for us was very clear. If you start, you finish. So if you want to start soccer, we're going to finish the semester of soccer. I'm not going to make you do soccer the rest of your life, but we paid for this semester of soccer. You're going to finish that semester of soccer, right?
Right.
If you want to start with a trombone instrument, cool, no problem. You're going to finish that semester, whatever that semester is for the payment period that you've paid, the year, whatever. You're going to finish it because what I want you to know is how to complete things. I also want you to be okay with quitting, but not in the middle of something that you said that you took all the things in consideration when we went over. Okay, it's going to be 4 practices a week. It's 2 hours each. It's going to be in the sun and the rain. Are you still going to do this? Come on. Yeah, mom, I really want to do it. Great. Then we're signing up because I gave you the information for you to make an informed consent decision to the best of your ability and you said yes. it's okay if you don't want to do it after this, but we have to get through it. So I think it's really just a matter of how supported that young person is in playing and following their curiosities, but also understanding if you're committing resources and time and energy to something, let's say that's a freshman year at college. Maybe you don't have to do all 4 years, but you're going to complete that 1 year. You're not going to drop out in the middle of the semester, assuming that nothing is wrong with mental health, physical health, right?
Right.
Like that you're not kind of deteriorating from something else going on, you're going to finish it.
So one of the things that I think we've done, like millennials have done a really good job of, or like not, I can't speak for all of us, but is being very aware. Like I think that like I was pushed, like, doctor, lawyer, and so we're like, no, we just want you to be happy. I want you to be happy. And then I am starting to see, you know, high schoolers and
Mhm,
these early 20s where they're it's almost like the pressure to be happy
mhm.
and healed and to have released this is paralyzing them
Yeah,
more. And it's like, well, that wasn't supposed to be the outcome.
yeah.
Like, it's just I remember, I've told this story a couple times on the podcast, but it was and I never mean this for this person because, like, bless her if she's listening and stuff, to, like, own
Mhm.
any shame with it at all. It was eye-opening to me of the pressure that each generation puts on themselves, right? And we're
Mhm.
just like, "Oh, we're healing it all," and then you're like, "Oh, didn't mean for that to be the outcome." Like, whoops. Um, and so, like, I was on a panel with, 3 other, like, incredible women, just
Mhm,
powerhouses, and, a woman, I don't know, we'll call her, like, 23-ish, and she was about to graduate chiropractic school, and
nice.
she asked how we balanced starting the practice, like, starting a small business
Mhm,
with the self-work.
mhm.
And I had a terrible answer because I was just like, "You don't." Like, your self-work is delayed. Honey, you hustle.
Which
You
is how
hustle
most of us enter entrepreneurship
and
is hustle, grind, right?
yeah, like, listen, I think at this
Mhm.
time I was 34 and I'm like, I just started therapy. Like, I spent my 20s, I found myself a mate, I bred and I started a business. There was no time to be like, "What about me, though?" I think I literally said those words to her.
Mhm.
It wasn't helpful words. You could tell from her face, like, that's not what she wanted to hear, but I was
Yeah.
just like, there's you can't be worried about that." In my head, that's
Mhm.
what I'm going like, "You can't be worried about that. There's plenty of time, but right now is not that time, and, like, you just need to live some life and then heal some stuff," and I'm assuming that's not the answer you want. I'm
Well,
assuming as
I
a
w I
trained
want
therapist.
I wanna respect that that was your truth, right? Like, that was your truth at the time. She asked you for your truth. She didn't say, "Be my therapist and give me your professional experience and expertise from this background that isn't necessarily yours." Your truth was, "I hustled, I grind. I probably burnt out at some point, and then I was like, 'Okay, let me actually pay some attention to this,'" which is unfortunately how so many people come to it, including me. I did the same thing because the chef that doesn't cook in their own kitchen, right? Like it's one of those things
Mhm.
when you're doing so much for other people, you're typically, especially as a woman, there are some brave men that relate to this too, but especially as a woman, we tend to nurture each other to do the same. Oh, it's okay, you tired, but go help grandma first. Go help your mom in the kitchen. Go help this. Go take this plate down to the neighbor. Go do this. Go do the. Oh, you're fine. You can sleep later. Like we're literally, I'll use the word bred again. We're bred 9 out of 10 times to put ourselves last and to smile through it and not show our actual disgust, our frustration, our overwhelm, our burnout. As parents, I know I've said, fix your face. I've said that to my kids, right? Especially when family or company is around, like, fix your face,
Mhm.
be mad in the privacy of your room, right? Like,
You can, like, just tell, like, you can just, like, picture them 20 years later, like, "My mom told me to fix my face, my"
exactly.
Ah.
Like, yeah, and I'm like, "And here's some money to pay for therapy to support you through
Right,
that
right, right,
that
right.
process." because that is the reality. And we want to do better, right? Like in parentheses, A and D, we want to do better. So the reality professionally, knowing better is also why I started the Lazy Overachiever show.
I was gonna say, yeah.
Right, which is literally for entrepreneurs who want to respect and trust their inner brilliance and work a little bit less by working smarter. I really don't like the framework smarter, not harder, because it takes away from the reality that work, as beautiful as it can be, is also brutally hard.
Mhm.
I absolutely am in love with the work that I do and how I help my power couples and my potent humans. And there are some aspects where I'm like, woo, child. Mama need a mama need a moment. Like, I need a
Mhm.
break. Because if you're doing the real work with people, having fun, playing, intimacy, orgasms, all the stuff that I do, like I'm literally amplifying intimacy from the bedroom to the boardroom. My work can be really, really
Ooh,
fun.
that should be your 3rd podcast.
My third podcast. It is actually the next book that's coming, so maybe
Okay,
play with
okay.
that. You heard it here first. You heard it
Yeah,
here
right.
first, guys,
Yeah.
right? On She Slays the Day. That's where it came from. Um, but within the guys, it was coming from this kind of evolution of me seeing myself changing and seeing the people I was attracting were change. And I was just like loosely using the term, not to trademark it or anything at the time. I was like, I'm a lazy overachiever. I'm over 40. This is where I'm at. I've learned a little bit along the way, right? People were like, oh, I'm a lazy overachiever too. So I kind of like ran with it and was like, well, let me start the show because I think I'm speaking to a lot of people like us who have had some skin in the game and are like, I don't have to do an 80-hour week the way I thought I had to do it, or a 16 or 18-hour day and take 12, 14 plus meetings. Maybe, hopefully, something comes out of it. I don't have to go to 18 different networking events, virtual and in person these days, over the course of a month in order to, prove that I have something valuable and to say I'm booked and busy, but then be too exhausted to love on the person that I sleep with or to love on the children that came from me or that I'm guardian over. Or when my mom calls, actually have some patience and energy to talk to her without wanting to be like, oh, all right already. Like, I'll talk to you next month. Like, leave me alone. And knowing that those are important relationships to me that really are why I'm working so hard. So, knowing that about myself, knowing that I was attracting other people, I had to back up and look at my profession in the personal development space, but also the tools, because there is a hypocrisy. We're telling people, slow down. Slow down, give yourself permission to pause, right? Like do the things. And then we're frustrated with them when they're not agreeing to come to every single event that we invite them to, or to share every single event, which means that they have to create social media bites and reels and stories and blah, blah, blah to do it. Or because they went to college with us 20 plus years ago, we're like, oh, girl, you got to fly out to Antigua and come to my third divorce party because it's really important that you be there. Why? We haven't talked in 5 years. Like, why am I filling a seat to occupy this space that makes you feel loved because you have more numbers? But I actually have a big project. I'm trying to build a library. I have a big project that I'm working on. And it's causing more of my energy and time to be in that yet. But then I feel guilty because I can't do all the things. I can't
Mhm.
be everywhere at one time. And in the reality of it, Lauren, you and I know better. People make time for what they really want to make time for, but they also will show up and not be present. And that's not what I want. If I'm having a party, an event, a baby shower, a breed shower, like whatever it is that I'm doing, I want people who want to be there. I want you to be there in spirit if you can't be there in person. And I'd rather you say, girl, love you, send in a gift. We'll have lunch in a couple of months when I'm through this kind of heap of work that I'm doing and I have some space versus I come and then I'm sitting complaining about everything or I'm looking like I don't want to be there because we've all had that happen too where now you're the person that's supposed to be loved on at this event. This is your wedding, this is your party, this is your whatever. But now you as that woman are now still taking care of your guests because someone looks unhappy. Someone looks frustrated because they should have said no. They should have said my boundary around my time for this isn't in alignment. As much as I love you and want to participate, this doesn't work for me. As much as I want to work with Lauren and we can create a major project, May of 2024 isn't it. It's too full and I would do a disservice to work on this project or to say yes to you. How about we revisit in the fall So we can look at May 2025. A lot of people are so concerned about the likability factor that and the people pleasing, if you will, that we won't say no. So to go back to your question of like, well, how do you make space for it? You make space by putting a appointment on your calendar with yourself, just like you would do your kid's doctor's appointment that you wouldn't play with. And if you don't have children, because I'm not just speaking to the people who, humanize other humans and breed, but for anyone, if something is important to you, a budget meeting with your accountant, your client meeting, your meeting with your supervisor that you would not move, you need a block that says deliberate moment, permission to pause. Ah, yes. Nobody has to know what that means. Intentionally selfish. You need some kind of something that tells you do not snooze that unless it is an actual critical emergency. Otherwise, you're just pushing what is the most important is the time with you to actually have space to even figure out what needs to be healed. Maybe you
Mhm.
forgave other people, but you didn't forgive yourself. You
How
need time for
often
that.
how often is this happening? Weekly, daily,
It depends on how layered your issue are. It's like real talk, I still have them Monday and Friday. I still have
and how
many, many,
long?
many years later. You can what I encourage people to do is start with something that you can be consistent with. So, like I literally have and I pull them out all the time, bubbles where I tell people because you want to kind of ignite the inner child from a neurobiological perspective. Do something. It doesn't have to be bubbles. Slinkies, like something that taps into nostalgia.
Not
Bubbles are it.
scrolling Instagram.
Not scrolling Instagram. Take 2 minutes, blow some bubbles. You're doing your deep breathing, you're playing, see how big you can make the bubble each time, like make it a little bit of a game for 2 minutes. You just actually did your deep breathing, you helped to recalibrate yourself, you massaged your organs, you did all this good sciencey stuff for your body, oxytocin and all of it. And if you can step into it a little further, start saying some positive things to yourself. You can step into it a little further, make some time to do some mirror work where you're actually talking to you. Girl, you look so sexy right now. I love how smooth your skin is. Your eyebrows, they faded a little bit and I like them thinner these days, right? Like speak to you the way that you would tell your friend, your sister, your cousin, your daughter who is doubting their gorgeousness, doubting their brilliance, doubting their capability, doubting their greatness. How would you speak to them? You would be cheerleading and uplifting like nobody's business to the point that it would almost feel uncomfortable. Start doing that with yourself because you do really need to take three positive kind of statements to negate the one that you said. And we all have said negative stuff. I can't believe I just spilled this goddamn tea. Da-da-da, you know what I mean? Like we'll
Mhm.
be really mean to ourselves. And that unkindness is not helping. It's just literally confirming all of the brokenness that your inner child is suffocating under that's inside. Whether your quote unquote damage happened to you as a child, like under 18, or your damage happened when you were in grad school at 27. It can happen at any time. It doesn't all have to be about I didn't have great parents. I have the best parents in the world and had the best experience, but they still can't protect you from the world. This world is layered with beauty and brutality and everything in between, which is why I had a job for 20 plus years as a clinician. It's also why I have a job now as a balance and relationship advisor, because people are trying to navigate through all of the yuck so they can create the bliss. And it's sometimes you need a little guidance in doing it. So whatever the time is that makes sense for you, if you can only dedicate 2 minutes because you're like, girl, I don't got time to pee, that's fine. 2 minutes, 2 minutes, set an alarm, 2 minutes while you're in the shower, if you need to. Like if you need to kind of layer it with something else, that's water is healing. So if you can layer it with that, that's fine. I started my mirror work almost 9.5, 10 years ago now, while I was brushing my teeth in the mirror, because there was nowhere else to fit it in. I was like, I literally, I can't put anything else on my schedule. So while I'm brushing my teeth, I'm like, oh, okay. And we start with silly things like, oh, acne, mole, where did that come from? Like we start with that. So what I tell you is when you hear those things come up and you start criticizing, even if it's just like a neutral reality criticism, it's not like you're being mean to yourself, but you're like, oh, I have a new hair under my chin, whatever it might be. Like immediately catch that and say, okay, back to love, like back to loving on you and start giving yourself some serious love, deserving, worthy talk. And there's, of course, there's a million other things that you can do after, but just start small and be consistent. And if you've never done this work before, you have to do it every day. It's not an option. You don't get to say only on Wednesday at 5 o'clock. You get to do that after you some years in, like when you're in the graduate school of self-love, so to speak. But when you are in kindergarten, every day you gotta look at them sight words. Every day you gotta say A, ah, B, buh, right? Like every day you
Mhm.
have to do that so you can start reading. You have to do the same thing with your self-care, your self-love, your self-growth work.
So the goal is to develop more self-love. I know that seems like it should be obvious, but like, all right, that's the goal is for more self-love. Do you in 2024, is this conversation the need for developing self-love because we love our in your opinion, because I
Mhm.
don't know, maybe you might have been around in a different like life, but do we need self-love more now because we are more disconnected from it than we've ever been? Or do you feel that each generation is becoming more woke? Or, or like more the need for connection, our spirit is opening up more, So like basically in the 1300s, did
Mhm.
they love themselves and they just were that was a part of it? Or were they so far from it and now in this lifetime where like, no, we need self-love to be a full human. What's your
Yeah,
opinion?
I think in the 1300s, everything was about community. So the love that you got was by being loved on and in the giving of love to others. But you weren't necessarily turning that love, if you will. If I'm kind of visualizing like a handheld mirror in my hand, you weren't turning that mirror on yourself. It was everything was connected to the doing and the giving, not necessarily the receiving, especially from yourself. And that's how the love kind of was generated. Things were also much more brutal, right? Like women were not loved on the way that we
Mhm.
insist on being loved on
Mhm.
these days. The word selfish came out of the 1600s when a pastor literally told a Pentecostal bishop, excuse me, literally told a group of parishioners who were asking, like, they wanted permission to tell their husbands no for sex when they wanted to not have sex. Like, how do I say no? Because I know it's my husband. I want to be able to say no when it's just not a good time. And it was, you are selfish if you do not, default to giving your husband whatever he wants, unless you are on your menses or you are pushing out a child. Outside of that, you don't have the right to say no because it is selfish behavior. And we have since taken that word, here we are, 2024, and women will call each other selfish because we actually said, no, girl, I can't make it this time. Right?
Mm.
We will do it to each
Mhm.
other. Like, oh, you you haven't been to anything in the last 4 months. And like, I love you. Am I not here for you when you need something? Do I not make myself available for real issues and challenges? When you needed that loan, did I not? Right? Like, but everything else will be discounted because something didn't stack up as you gave to them, like the 1300s. Give to me, give to others, give to me, give to others. But I also need to give to myself. So I think part of the other context of that is yes, you're right about the wokeness. Like we are awakening to there's more to just doing and giving. There's more to that. We also need to strengthen that muscle to receive. And the best way to work that muscle, just like exercise anywhere else, yes, you work with your personal trainer 2 or 3 times a week. But what do they say? When you're at home, make sure you do this work. So when you come back to training, it's easier. So you have to do this individually. And we weren't doing that before. So I think it's a both and. Like we're more aware that this is a muscle that we've not actually strengthened, but also we're kind of exhausted from doing it for so many people, the jobs, the organizations that unfortunately will remind you that you are a cog in a wheel in a minute, right? And let you go and release you for whatever the reason is. And they just told you how great you were with an award and a pizza day, just 2 days prior. But you log in and your key card doesn't work with no notice. Like we're also seeing that, and people are awakening to the reality that they're not as important as they thought they were within the kind of like larger construct of, I dare say, the matrix, right? Like if we were
Mhm.
to go back to use that term, but also they are really important to their nuclear families, whatever that looks like for them. And they want to be here to enjoy the process more. So I think we're seeing that a lot with Gen Z, honey. They are kicking and screaming what you won't do. Like, what you're
Mhm.
not going to do is make me think that I got to answer these emails at 4 a.m. on a Sunday. That is the day of Sabbath for me, whether I go to a church or not. Like, I am not doing it. And they are serious about it, which I completely applaud. On
Yeah.
the other side, there's an extreme to not understanding that community is still necessary to keep the wheel turning. Like, no, you shouldn't have to answer an email at 4 a.m. or whatever the case is, but I still need you to show up on time. I still need you to participate in the team,
I'm not a bad
projects.
person not a bad boss because I told you you couldn't take 3 months off to go to Portugal.
Right. Like, I'm not horrible. You don't have to make a viral video about how I don't get the importance of work-life balance. Like,
Right,
there has to be a medium, if you
right.
will, or a median where you're coming to. And I know what's the word? It's slipping my head. When we agree, when we come together and make
Compromise?
a compromise. Yes, I
Yeah.
don't know why I was blinking. Thank you for that, Lauren. I know compromise is an icky, sticky word because people feel like they're losing a piece of themselves. Like, I see it a
Mm.
lot with our couples. Like, I don't want to compromise. I tell them all the time, I don't want you to compromise. I want you to do what feels good to you and feels good in your relationship. It can't
Mhm.
be just you and not the relationship, because then that tells me that you don't want the relationship. And if that's the antithesis of where you really are, then it's like, how do we make it so it works for both? Because we live in this space of A and D. We live in the space of and that kind of reshifts how we can get to that. And both people, in the case of a couple, have to be willing. If it's the woman in the example you gave earlier who's talking about her business, like she's trying to create that and for her business and growing it and making sure she can show up as a boss but also have time for herself, it's like, how does that work for you? Well, you know what, if you're not really alive until 10 a.m., like, you don't feel like you can really think, and I'm not talking about, like, without coffee or whatever, but if you're like, "I really don't process well before 10," great. Then put your self-love time, your self-care time, whatever you wanna call it, your permission to pause, somewhere between 7 and 9:30, and then you actually get in the quote, unquote, "office" at 10 a.m., ready to go, and that's how you do it. Does that mean, like, now I have to work 8 plus hours from that? Not necessarily, because you're coming in at your sharp time. Instead of setting up at 8, dragging for 2 hours, I'm scrolling through emails, I'm kind of responding, I'm perseverating on this for 2 hours because you're not really awake. You just wasted time that you could have been loving on yourself, wiggling your toes with a bath, drinking some tea, writing in your journal, having an orgasm, making love, taking a walk, doing yoga, like whatever fills your cup, which is different for everyone. I'm thinking of an actual engineer client who detests taking baths. Like, I detest bubble baths. I'm like, don't do bubble baths, right? Like, that doesn't have to be part of your practice just because someone in a book said bubble baths are great self-care. Not for you. If it grosses you out sitting in your own filth, like, that's okay. Right. So
Right.
it's really giving yourself that space to figure out what works for you, and you need time to be curious and adventurous and play to do it.
So this final part, I want to go because you brought it up multiple times. And
Mhm.
so just to like listeners, we're going to go enter the X-rated part of the interview.
Come on, girl.
So so you have brought up intimate. I mean, it's a part of the equation.
Yes,
Like you when you were making this mathematical equation,
that's
it
right.
it wasn't enough to just be like, yes, an intimate relationship or, a relationship. It was like, no, an intimacy.
Mhm, mhm,
So, in your work with couples, non-couple, single people,
mhm.
why do you feel including sex, orgasms, all of that is so important in the equation?
So I will also give context. Intimacy, for the way I define it, I know some people have like 30 versions of intimacy. I have 13. Self intimacy is the 13th. But intimacy, the sex part is like 1/13th of it. And not everyone is sexually inclined from a penetration perspective for various reasons. There could be medical reasons, there could be issues, there could be challenges, it could be just disinterest. A lot of women do not feel sexually fulfilled with penetration, right? Like, so there's a lot of those layers to it. But intimacy, high level, highlight reel is just deeper connection. And sex is the deepest you can get physically, right? Like when
Mhm.
you enter in or receive someone, which again, I come back to that receive muscle again, it's really important, regardless of whether or not it's a heterosexual context or not. It is the closest that two humans can be outside of a medical procedure of like a bone transplant, right? Like it's the
Right.
closest you can be. So the sex is important if it is important to the individuals in the relationship. I happen to have a really high libido, so sex is always at the top of my mind, and I'm just like dirty that way in such a good way. But not all the couples I work with are. Like sometimes you can be in a relationship where someone has a higher libido than the other, someone is more interested or not. We concentrate on the other aspects of intimacy, like recreational intimacy. When was the last
That's
time
having
y'all played?
sex in public.
No, no. I mean,
Not for me.
Lauren,
I'm too
it
much of,
can
like, a people pleaser, like, getting in trouble, I would be
I
like,
mean,
"Absolutely not. I cannot have
it
sex in
could
public."
be, like, it could be that if you want it, but recreational intimacy is really just how well do you play with each other? And well, let me say that differently. How
Right.
well do you play together?
Yep.
So like, yes, we can take like we have a game where we just send a couple a regular game of Jenga. And you can play Jenga regularly just to, have laughter because laughter is medicine. There's a lot of science to that. And just to enjoy it, kind of tap into your inner childhood of being silly, things knock on the floor. Ha ha ha. This is so silly because we can be adults that are very rigid and
Mhm.
organized and we don't make messes and we don't make noise. And, we can become those people really easy. Or we can turn Jenga up and play it like strip poker. So every time something falls off the Jenga board, right, with the building blocks, then you have to take something off. And when we get to the point where everything has fallen, whoever did the last one is the one who does the giving, and the other one has to give the instruction of how they want to receive it. So we could turn up anything.
Ernest over here turning 7 shades of red. It's fine. It's fine. Okay, but, like, there are so there's kinda like 2 categories of humans, and I'm
Yeah.
not even gonna put this on women, but, like, I have a lot of female friends,
Yeah.
that have no interest.
Mhm.
I shouldn't say no interest, but, like,
Low.
very low libido.
Mhm.
Now, how do you determine whether that is something that is, like, a hormone response from overexhaustion and
Yeah.
needs to be healed? And,
Mhm.
like, no, it's not healthy that you don't
Right.
wanna have sex with your husband versus there's, like, rumors. I don't have as many of these people in my life, I don't think,
Mhm.
but, like, oh, what's the word that they are labeled? Like, a lot of teenagers,
Or like asexual where they're just not
asexual.
interested at all.
Yep,
Mhm.
just not interested.
Yeah.
Like,
W
what?
So that's a good question. So a lot of it is in the background information that I have to kind of cultivate from the person. I have to create the trust in order for them to be willing to share that.
Mhm.
But if in my kind of diagnostic process with a new individual, because they don't have to come in as a couple, but a new individual that's coming, and saying, "Oh, typically they'll come and say, I want to create more balance in my business. Will you help me?" But then it's all the other layers of stuff that we realize we have to work through. Well, some of that will be if they ever felt like they had to do it. And I hear this a lot, even from married couples that are in monogamous relationships. It's a chore. I feel like I
Mm,
have to because this
mhm.
is what some grandmama, some auntie said that this is what you have to do to keep your person around. So if I can kind of go back to all of their, not every single experience, but most of their market experiences in a sexual relationship, if they feel like they had to but didn't want to, there was never a time when they actually felt inclined or excited about even forget how it ended, the actual sexual experience. But if it started with no excitement, then they most likely are asexual and they were trying to convince themselves otherwise. But if that's not the case, if they were like, no, girl, there was a time that I was a rabbit out in these streets, right? Like I was, like I was excited. It didn't matter, whatever. If it was chemistry, it was on and popping, then that's different. There's usually an incident, like a core incident that might have been confirmed by other micro incidents that made them decline because of adrenal fatigue. For a lot of women, they just were exhausted. Their hormones are now all completely out of whack, and that's a different situation. So it really takes the human that I'm speaking to, male or female, to be really honest about when it showed up for them of a noticing, or maybe when did their partner say like, hey, it's been 8 months and you haven't even so much as allowed me to hug you, right? Like what's happening? And usually when that's happening, they're pushing away all affection because they're afraid that it might lead to anything else.
Mhm.
And that's also usually a sign that there was some kind of incident if that wasn't their baseline, their normal. So a lot of my work is trying to figure out for people like where is the root? And the only way to get to the root is to follow the thread, which means they have to be honest with me. And every one of the positives is because I come from a space of high discretion, I'm still licensed. I don't serve as a therapist anymore, so I'm not bound to specific states, but I still very much hold to the creed of making sure that I don't harm anyone, keeping everything confidential unless there is a threat of harm to themselves or others. But outside of that, not even the team knows who all of our power couples and our potent humans are unless they need to know for something specific. Because that discretion, especially with a lot of people that I work with that are in very public places, they don't necessarily want people to know that they're working on any parts of their intimacy, even if it's not
Right.
sex, right?
Right.
So, but there's an assumption that if you're working with Naketa or you're working through ThigPro, because we're amplifying intimacy from the bedroom to the boardroom, there's some version of that, which can be depending on your culture, your community, where you grew up, just the implication of that can be like, oh, like what's going on with John? Like, why does he need to work with ThigPro? And so we respect that very, very much.
Well, okay, so say more about that of like there is you're right. Like there is this perception of like, oh, you need intimacy work. Like,
Mhm,
oh,
mhm,
interesting. Like why do we do that? Is that do we think that they're for weak? Like you're not perfect? And then even then, like, well, what would like what would that equation be that would be perfect for them of like, oh no, you don't need intimacy work anymore. Like, good
yeah.
job. You've checked it off. You
Right. It's an interesting thing. So my human self wants to say because we're children, right? Like, oh
Yeah.
my God, you're talking about sex, right? Like, there's going
Yeah,
to be
yeah,
people
yeah.
who listen to this podcast like, oh my gosh, where's my headphones? My kids can't hear that word. Like, right. Like there's that. And I respect everyone's process of where they want to introduce information, but that's also why it's so negative. Is because we've sexualized things and made it quote unquote dirty that are just normal
Mhm.
behaviors. And a lot of us have grown up. I when I do keynotes on boardroom intimacy, which is not talking about sex, it's about the
Right.
interconnection of creating those power partnerships. I've had people in the audience that at the end was like, "Ooh, you almost lost me when you said when I saw the title slide that said intimacy because I thought this is not the place until you start talking." And then of course those be the same people that's like, "Can I do a consultation with you so I can talk about my actual intimacy," right? Like those
Mhm.
will be the same people that want to talk about it in private. And I think a lot of it is because of the way our culture and our societies, depending, because we do global work. So it really depends too on where you are in the world
Oh,
and
yeah.
right. And like how that's seen and portrayed. And I respect it all. Like I respect that that is your normal. I also say, because I'm a rebellious person by nature, that normal is not necessary. And if we can really get our head around the fact that just because this is normal for me to only talk about or not talk about sex, to turn out the lights, pull down the shades, go under the covers and say, don't look at me when I do it, just because that's your normal doesn't mean it's necessary for everyone else to agree with that as their reality. So a lot of the work is also kind of helping people kind of lower the judgments. Like
Right.
be observant, have your moral code, have your values, but be really mindful that those are yours. They don't necessarily belong to other people. So
Right.
your other question over like, is there a formula for perfect? Yeah, when you're 6 feet under, when you're dead and you can no longer make any more mistakes, you are
Mhm.
perfect because you cannot make any more mistakes. While you are living, you are a beautifully imperfect person that hopefully is doing the work for yourself so you're not projectile vomiting your trauma, your drama, your anger, your rage onto other humans into their backpack that they now have to carry that they didn't ask for.
Right.
So,
Okay, so coming back, one of the last questions, but like coming back to the word compromise.
mhm,
Let's say you have a partner that and My husband would want me to let you all know that this is not us. This is truly just a random question that Lauren had. All right, so let's say you have a partner that's like, I like sex once a week. I
Mhm,
like it then. I'm good. And then you have another partner that is like, I like sex once a day.
mhm.
How do you help them? What does compromise look like for that?
Yeah.
Because at some end, if it's any more sex than the person wants, we're kind of back to that original issue of like being forced to serve.
Yeah. So my question will be reversed for the person who wants it, in your example, once a day, right? Like
Yep.
that wants it more frequently. Is where is that coming from? Because for a
Well, what do you
lot of
mean? Isn't it
people,
libido?
no, not necessarily. For some people, sex is medicine. It's just the way drinking can be medicine to help you escape, to help you numb.
Uh-huh.
Eating can be medicine. Shopping can be medicine. Like all those dopamine hits, sex gives a
Uh-huh.
dopamine hit too. So then the question comes up, which of course is the work when I work with
I would just
power
like to
couples.
reiterate, this is definitely
This is
not
not
that
you.
person. No, it's definitely not me.
This is not
As
you.
I'm just going, "Oh, no."
This is not Lauren, guys. This is just a general hypothetical question that's coming from her spirit of all the people she's served and worked with.
Right.
But that would be the question of like, where is it coming from for you, where it is basically becoming a non-negotiable for you to not be able to enter into this, like to the point where it's daily, because that can also be an example of something that's uncalibrated in you as this human, male, female, other, whatever, that's going on where you feel like if I don't get this, then my marriage isn't working, then my relationship isn't working. I wouldn't say that someone who needs sex once a day qualifies as a sex addict, but if they're really focused on it to a point of fixation, I would say
Mhm.
that there's some individual work beyond the one time a month that I see them separately before coming together that we probably need to do to look at what's being fixed in the receiving of that, 60 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever it is of the time that they have together. What do they feel like they're actually getting besides
I
an
like how you just
orgasm?
casually dropped
Mhm.
60 minutes in there. Like, you know?
Listen, Lauren, you just have to read my book, Selfish. That's all I'm going to
Right.
say. That's all I'm going to say about
Buying now.
that.
Well, you definitely answered that differently than I thought you were going to. So, huh,
Well, what did you
huh.
think? I'm
I
curious.
don't know. I thought like compromise would be like, all right, well then it's every other, like, or three
Mm-mm,
times a week. That's the compromise. But you took that.
mm-mm.
You also
Yeah.
fixated on the person I didn't think you were going to fixate on.
Oh, you
Like,
thought it would be the other person that didn't want. Well,
yeah,
so the work is both, right? It's two people because often we'll have couples come and be like, "Well, it's his issue, it's her issue." I'm like,
right.
"Okay, well, you're both agreeing, ready and willing to do this work, right? Well, let's
Hmm.
see where those kind of calcified chaos issues that are over your purpose, that are over your pleasure, which is very heavily connected to it, that is actually kind of smothering you both. It's not his versus her. Now, there are couples where I'm like, mm-mm, this is really out of balance because you've attracted in whoever the you is, you've attracted in this person who has really reminded you of the people who have traumatized you because it's familiar. And this actually isn't a good place for either one of you to be. So there may be some conscious uncoupling work that I've had to do. That's a very, very rare part of the work that I need to do because I typically say we don't work with couples who are knocking on the door of divorce. We want them to be good enough, just a few love
Right.
gaps that we can close and then amplify the intimacy, right? Like to do the greater work. But occasionally in the work and the uncovering, we're like, oh, okay, this person has a narcissistic personality disorder. This is really, really challenging for both people in this relationship. And one is actually, I don't know if you know anything about like twin syndrome, where one twin inside the uterus is like sucking all of the energy from the other, and like all the blood is going to one.
Mm-hmm.
So, one twin is getting everything, the other one is basically dying within. That's what happens in a lot of marriages when something is really discalibrated that way. So, if that is rare, that I come across it because of our vetting process. But if that comes up, I absolutely will support them in conscious uncoupling, but that's a rare situation. And it's usually not because of sex.
Right.
Sex is like 0.0001% of the problem.
Oh man. Okay. Um. I wanna talk about intimacy in the boardroom at a different time, so we're gonna have to do a part 2.
Mhm.
Um,
I'm down.
yeah. Okay, how can people like talk about your podcast? How can people get more of you and like learn more?
Yeah, so the best place to go is to our parent company site, which is thigpro.com. It's a little play off my name, THIGPRO.com. Everything is there, including the links on Apple, Spotify, and all the places for the Balance Bowley podcast, which has a more general audience of people who are interested in navigating transitions in relationships and things that are impacting their work life balance. Where the lazy overachiever is more focused on entrepreneurs that are really looking for strategies to help to recalibrate and to own their power so they can work less and trust their inner brilliance a whole lot more.
I love it. And then book, where can we find Selfish?
Oh, Selfish is everywhere. So, yes, it is on Amazon. And if that is the easiest place, go there. But we love to support local bookstores. So, there is a organization called bookshop.org that if you go in there, you can literally get the book delivered through your local bookshop. And it gives them somewhere between 10 and 20% as well to the actual local bookshop that you ordered it from. So, if
That's pretty
Amazon
cool.
is easy for you, go for it. But we
Right.
really like to support the
What
local
was that site again? Bookshop.
bookshop.org.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, Nikita, thank you so much. I would say I'm surprised at like the path in which we took, but I'm really not. I'm just like, we could have taken so many paths, and you
Right.
brought up the word orgasm too many times where I'm like, okay, we're gonna go there.
So much
So,
fun.
uh, all right, she sayers, we will have those links for you below. Go check out her podcast. Make sure you subscribe and follow because that helps podcasts get seen as well. And thank you so much, Nikita.
Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate you.
All right, she slayers. Until next week. Bye.